Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1, Virginia Morris. We warmly welcome the family of Company Sergeant Major Lawrence Gladstone Lowth, who are watching the live stream of this ceremony. His story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial and students from Our Lady of the Rosary Catholic Primary School, Shelley Beach, New South Wales. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Catapult party, attention! Catapult party presents.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Catapult party shoulder, arms. Catapult party order, arms.
Please be seated if you can do so. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Company Sergeant Major Lawrence Gladstone Lowth. Lawrence Lowth was born around 1893 in Townsville, part of the large family of Thomas and Margaret Lowth. Lawrence's Irish-born father, Thomas, had arrived in Australia as a young man, joining the police force in Brisbane and going on to have a career as a detective before establishing the Louth Hotel in Townsville. Thomas Louth became a prominent and well-known member of the Townsville community and was an alderman for well over a decade. Young Lawrence attended St Joseph's College on the lower North Shore of Sydney before finding work as a hardware salesman. In October 1915, Lawrence Lowth enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force at Townsville. He was eventually allotted to the 41st Battalion, which was raised in Brisbane in February 1916, with recruits from Brisbane, Northern Queensland, and the Northern Rivers District of New South Wales. After some initial training, on the 16th of May 1916, the battalion embarked at Sydney on the troop ship Dismounting, bound for the conflict in Europe. Landing in England in July, the men of the 41st Battalion continued their training on Salisbury Plain before arriving in France in late November. They entered the front line for the first time on Christmas Eve 1916 and spent the bleak winter alternating between service in the front line and training and labouring in the rear areas. Louth showed leadership potential and by early February 1917 had been promoted to sergeant. In early June 1917, the battalion had its first experience of major conflict when it played a supporting role at the Battle of Mazine. Towards the end of the month, Louth was detached to reinforcement camps, where he would have been training battalion reinforcements, preparing them for gruelling trench warfare ahead. He returned to his unit on the 10th of August 1917, but in late September was posted to the 11th Training Battalion, where he used his experience training reinforcements in drilling fresh recruits. In November, he transferred to the 9th Training Battalion. At the end of 1917, Sergeant Lowth prepared to return to the fighting on the Western Front. He rejoined his unit on the 2nd of January 1918, and it was resting and refitting in northern France. When the German army launched its latest great offensive in March 1918, the battalion was rushed south, where it played a role in blunting its drives towards the vital railway junction of Amiens. On the 3rd of June, the battalion was in line and was subjected to continuous bombardment, which destroyed their front line on the right and left. The bombardment continued overnight and into the following day, and the rear areas were subject to gas shells. Louth was admitted to a field hospital suffering the effects of the gassing, and after initial treatment was sent to a convalescence hospital in Rouen. He was back with the battalion less than a week later, and in early August was promoted to Company Sergeant Major, the highest rank of a non-commissioned officer in an infantry battalion. The Allies launched their own offensive in early August 1918, pushing back against the gains made during the German Spring Offensive. The 41st Battalion played an active role in the initial attack and the long advance that followed through August. With the German front line broken, battles took place as the Allies forced the Germans back to the Hindenburg Line. On the morning of the 1st of September 1918, the 41st Battalion assaulted German lines, following behind a rolling barrage of artillery fire that had begun at around 6 a.m. The barrage wasn't as effective as expected as heavy fighting began. It became apparent that the enemy machine guns had not been silenced as had been anticipated. The battalion's commanding officer described the machine gun fire as the greatest we'd ever experienced, and casualties were heavy. The volume of machine gun fire prevented the removal of the wounded from front lines, and there were reports of Germans firing on stretcher bearers. While the assault eventually met with success, the cost was high. Among the dead was Company Sergeant Major Lawrence Lowth, who was just 25 years old. Initially buried where he fell, his remains were later reburied at the Hem Family Military Cemetery, where they lie today, under the inscription chosen by his grieving family, sacred to his memory. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the Pool of Reflection. This is one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Company Sergeant Major Lawrence Gladstone Lowth, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Catapult Party presents
lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult party in Woods. Turn. Catapult party, quick, march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.